G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Wineback Wednesday. And today I was down there just driving past the local pub, and I went into the bottle shop, and I thought, why don't I grab something local that I could talk about for Wineback Wednesday. And I grabbed the 2021 Bondar Rayner Grenache. Andre and Selina, the couple, have started the brand a number of years ago, and they bought the very, very well-known Rayner Vineyard down here in McLaren Vale on Chalk Hill Road. In the late 90s, when I was working in Brokenwood, we took a lot of Shiraz from there, the Rayner Shiraz, and it's one of my favourite wines from the portfolio at Brokenwood. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if they get any anymore. I suspect they don't, unfortunately. Andre and Selina and the family bought the vineyard a number of years ago and making small quantities of a wide range of varieties, and making some absolute cracker wine. So I saw it and I thought, why not give it a crack? I haven't had the Grenache off that block for a number of years before. Well, the last time I tried any wine off that block was well before Andre and Selina took over the vineyard. But the vineyard, the Grenache, is about I think it's about 2 acres, so it's hardly anything there, maybe a little bit more than 2 acres. It's about 45-50 years old. The Rayner family planted the vineyards, started planting, I think, Shiraz in the 1950s, and things have sort of evolved since then, and obviously these guys are taking over. So without further ado, give it a crack. 21 was a cool vintage. The yields were quite large, but for this wine, I believe that they've handpicked they've gone through the vineyard and found the vines that are of sort of more balanced crop level, or even on a lower side of crop level, and pick them independently by hand. Natural fermentation. It's got about 20% stalks in it, so whole bunches, so you actually put the whole bunch in, you get a little bit of texture and tannins, and just sort of some sappiness and some nice sort of talky sweetness that comes off the stalks. So it just adds texture and another dimension. So 20% of that, and then once the post-fermentation, the wine was matured in older hogsheads, 300 litres, and also 2/3 in that and about 1/3 in ceramic eggs. So without further ado, let's give it a crack. I mean, love the packaging. Pretty simple, classical label. That nice sort of pastel colour, light pale blue, and here we go. So straight off, I mean, you can see that there's a lovely lovely red colour in the wine, not overly dark, which is great. Grenache is warm climate Pinot Noir, and often colour in Pinot Noir, both Pinot Noir and Grenache, is not overly important. It's usually about the fragrance, the aromas, and the structure, and the fine tannins and stuff that you're after. So straight off, really perfumed. There's nice sorts of plums and sour cherries there, very fragrant, spice and lift. And very fine and soft, but there's this nice level of red fruit ripeness without being, I suppose, over the top. And there's a cooler year, so you are going to be more sort of spicy and fragrant and softer, but there's a nice level of fruit ripeness, but with a lovely softness about it. Very fine tannins that come through, and that fruit just runs and just sits, and not overly juicy. I mean, there's a juiciness to it, but it's not sort of sweet juiciness. There is a savouriness element to it as well, and it is in the obviously one of the leaders in the region in regards to Grenache. Grenache, I suppose, in the 80s and 90s, it was a bit of a dirty word in many ways. Everyone was Shiraz, and a lot of the old vineyards, there was a vine pull scheme, obviously, when the government was paying growers to rip some of their vineyards out, so we lost some of the older material that was around, both down here in McLaren Vale and in the Barossa Valley in particular. And but there was obviously some vineyards around that were dodged a bullet and survived, and we're now reaping the rewards. There's only, I believe, about 5% of the red fruit that is grown in McLaren Vale, or Greater McLaren Vale region, is Grenache. So there's not a huge amount of it around. There is more being planted, but of the older sort of 40, 50 plus year old material, there's not a lot of it left. Most of it up is that sort of northern end, sort of Seaview and Blewett Springs. But yeah, and that's sort of and it's been open for a minute or so. It's actually evolving. You take that red fruit, it's probably getting a little bit darker, and there's lovely fragrance. There's some violets in behind there, really unusual. And there's some more savoury herbal elements coming through, but in a dried herb element, not a greenness to it. But overall, I'm glad I grabbed that off the shelf. It is getting a little bit juicier now and fleshier, but not in a simple way. There's a nice sort of, still that nice element of fine tannins, and there's some savoury notes and some really good length behind it. But overall, that's a cracker. The 2021 Bondar Rayner Grenache from their own vineyard. So thanks for listening. Speak to you soon.